At this point, where we are as a board is to make two preliminary decisions. First, we're going to create and present to the town a plan that would be in compliance with the Act's requirements. And second, we have come up with a preliminary proposal with an approach that we think is the minimum we can do to be in compliance, and that plan, we think, is in Wenham's best interest. Compliance means we are engaging in a zoning exercise. We're creating what's called an overlay zone on 2 districts in the town, which will allow for a certain density of units as required by the Act. Some key points to this, which my colleagues will discuss in more detail, is this is an allowable zoning density. It is not required development. Because the density is allowed, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be developed as such, developed at all, or developed at that density. Development activity, as everyone knows, requires water, sewer, financing, and demand for the housing units. None of that is obviously available for either of these sites that we're going to talk about tonight. I also want to emphasize before I turn it over to my colleagues that there are going to be many opportunities for the entire community to weigh in on this. First, we're going to be considering the details of this at our meetings over the summer. We meet the second Thursday of every month at 7 o'clock, and we always welcome input from the public on our items, which will include developing the details of the overlay zone. Second, once the overlay zone is written, we are going to hold, as we're required to do, a formal public hearing to take comment from the community. And that may lead to changes in the details of the overlay zone that we're preparing. And then finally, the whole thing comes up to special town meeting for a vote by the town. This fall, probably in October, there will be a special town meeting. It hasn't been scheduled yet. But everyone in town will have an opportunity to come up and give the thumbs up or the thumbs down to the plan. So lots of opportunity for input. We're interested in what you have to say tonight. And I appreciate you being here. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Margaret Hoffman and Dan Pasquarello. We're happy to take your thoughts and answer questions after the presentation, which should take about 15 minutes, and give you some of the details of where we are now. And I'd ask that you put your hand up to be recognized, come up to the microphone, and give your name so that we can make sure we have it correctly. And above all, I would like everyone here to please be courteous. We know that this is a hot button issue all across the MBTA communities region, and we value all our relationships with everyone in this town. So we promise to be courteous, and we ask you the same. Thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dan on my left and Margaret.
So I'll take them.
So Margaret's going to go first.
I get to go first. Great.
Yep. Thank you, Ann. I just want to thank everyone.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
You didn't hear me when I was speaking? Speak louder.
Okay. All right. Thank you again. My name is Margaret Hoffman. I'm the town planner. Kate Mallory is our land use director. She's with me. And Kate and I have been involved with the planning board in this process. Yeah, we're getting a little reverb.
That's good for Ann. Let's go ahead.
Okay. Let me see if I can move over a little bit. So just a little background on MBTA communities. There's 177 communities in Massachusetts that are considered MBTA communities. Within those, there are 4 categories. A rapid transit community, which is described as an MBTA community, that has within its borders at least 100 acres of developable station area, associated with one or more subway stations or a Silver Line bus rapid transit station. The next category is a commuter rail community. That does not meet the criteria for rapid transit, and it has within its borders at least 100 acres of developable station area associated with one or more commuter rail stations. Then there are two other categories below that. Adjacent community just means that it has within its borders 100 acres and is not an adjacent small town, which that has within its borders 100 acres of developable station area and has a population density of less than 500 persons per square mile, or a population of not more than 7,000 year-round residents. Thanks, Kate. Next slide, please. So Wenham is defined by the state as a commuter rail community. Even though we have a smaller population, we still have more than 100 acres within that developable station area, which is the half mile around the Hamilton Wenham station. Not all of these 111 acres are going to be zoned for multifamily housing. Wenham is required to only zone 24 acres. Of those 24 acres, only 20% need to be within that half-mile radius, which is 4.8 acres. The state has come up with formulas for calculating the density of these areas, and according to the state requirements, Wenham's number of units is 365. That doesn't mean we have to create those, nor does it mean that the actual properties in the district can even accommodate that many units based on septic and other factors. But the number of acres, along with density requirements, have to add up to that. So the amount of acres within the half mile only needs to be 4.8 and accommodate 78 units, which is 20% of the 365. The rest of the acreage and unit count can be anywhere else that the town just determines, as long as it qualifies. So Dan's going to go into the details of those districts in a few minutes. Just the next slide. Oh, yeah. Oh, go back one, Kate. So this slide shows that half mile from the train station. Within that, the state has determined, based on excluded land, which is things like wetlands, publicly owned properties, different categories, they've excluded certain land, so they determined that within that we have 111 acres of developable land. Next slide, Kate, please. So I know you've all heard many times that this is an exercise in zoning, and the town doesn't have to create any units. That is true. By simply creating the districts and the zoning to accompany the districts, we will be in full compliance if it's voted at town meeting. Wenham is currently considered in interim compliance with the state until December 31st, because we submitted an action plan when we were required to, and the state accepted that. Because of the December 31st deadline, the town will be holding a special town meeting to allow the community to vote on the adoption. We'll submit that vote to the state. If it's a favorable vote, we'll be in compliance while the Office of Housing and Livable Communities and the Attorney General review it.
Hi.
So as far as compliance goes, you've already heard that communities that are not in compliance will not receive funding from these 3 state programs: Mass Works, the Housing Choice Grant Program, and the Local Capital Projects Fund. For people who aren't familiar, Mass Works funds public infrastructure projects, support growth opportunities contributing to long-term strength and sustainability of the Commonwealth. Wenham does not utilize Mass Works funding right now, as far as I know, and I don't believe we have in the past. It does support roadway safety in small rural communities. It's at least 10% of the funding has to be awarded to those projects per statute. But again, Wenham doesn't utilize that one. The housing choice grants, those are only for communities that have been designated as a housing choice community. And Wenham is not a housing choice community. The other one is the Local Capital Projects Fund. This is a little bit more difficult to figure out. It's, from what I've heard or read, it's a federal program that aims to expand the availability of reliable high-speed internet. It was funded by ARPA funds recently, and it's used especially for rural America, tribal communities, and low and moderate income communities. Wenham, again, does not utilize these funds, and I don't know whether Wenham would ever be eligible for those funds. So that being said,
Okay.
since this law has been enacted, originally these three were the only grant programs that you couldn't qualify for. The state has come back and said that there are other additional grant opportunities that they will take compliance into consideration when you apply for them. Some of those are grant opportunities that I have utilized for the planning board. There are some planning grants, the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Grant Program. Again, you're not automatically denied access to those funds, but compliance is taken into consideration. But right now, that's all we know. We don't know whether the state is going to go further with that and decide that they're going to withhold any other public funding. Next slide. So we want to talk about density a little bit because I think density is where people get concerned about what are these units going to look like, how much can they build in each area. So this is an example of possible 15 units per acre density. If you see on the 3 units on 0.25 acres, so on a quarter acre, you could put three houses side by side. You could put 3 townhouses. 1 acre, they could put 15 units. That could look like several different types of housing. The state's goal here is to create that missing middle housing. I don't think they're hoping for large apartment complexes. I think they're looking more for smaller homes that will fit more families. So next slide, Kate. So this is an actual development that some of you may be familiar with. It's in the town of Hamilton. And this is Willow Street's Flats. This is an 18-unit building built on 1 acre. It's actually at a greater density than what we're proposing at 13 and 17, which you'll see in a bit. This is a mixed use with retail on the first floor and apartments above. They were able to get a septic system and parking on just 1 acre for 18 units. Next slide. So this is another example of a small development that I found.
That street, right?
It's on Willow Street in Hamilton.
Yeah.
This is another example of similar density to what we're looking at in Wenham. This is a project in Beverly at 26 McKinley Ave. It has 14 residential units on 1.3 acres. So this shows more townhouse. There's a few townhouses and a couple of, they reused some older buildings on this, I believe, and were able to create a few extra apartments. So those are some ideas of the density, just a couple of examples that we're looking at. So I think that ends my portion of the presentation, and Dan Pasquarello will take over the next.
Yes, we're done. I got it, thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Can everybody hear me? My name is Dan Pasquarello. I'm the vice chair of the planning board. And we've been at this process, as Ann said, for a long time. We met with an outside consultant. I think our first meeting was back in February of 2023. And the goal was to identify areas in town that would comply, that would be districts that would comply with the statutory requirements. So what you should have on the screen is a map with a couple of circles, which indicate the 2 districts that we as the planning board have decided to put forward for this process. And I'm going to go through those in a little bit more detail. If we could go to the next slide, Kate. Okay, so proposed District 1 we have labeled as 0 Walnut 100 Larch. And this is MFOD1, and it is located within the half-mile radius. It's a total of 6.3 acres. And in this district, the density will be 13 units per acre.
Now, what's the maybe will be?
It could be, sorry. Well, yes, proposed, it could be, that's right. The minimum that we have to meet for zoning is we have to zone for up to 73 units within the half-mile acre to meet the minimum. Now, you may be asking, why are we picking a district that's 6.3 acres if we only need to have 4.8. I'm sorry, I'm trying to speak loudly but not destroy this microphone. We had to pick a slightly larger district size here because under the state's guidelines, they would not let us split parcels. And we also had to have an area that was contiguous. So the, if we go to the next slide, I think you can see what the two parcels are. So this is MFOD1. I believe lot 20 here is owned by the Hamilton Wenham LLC, and lot 21, the smaller parcel, is owned by the Haverhill Gas Company. This is behind Crosby's, behind the parking lot. And next slide, please, Kate. So multifamily overlay district 2 is at Boulder Lane. It's a total of 27 acres. And the density here is slightly higher. It will be 17, up to 17 units per acre. And the reason for this is that under the state guidelines, we have to meet an average density of 15 units per acre across the whole MFOD district. So because District 1 is slightly less, this needs to be slightly higher. And if we go to the next slide.
Then what? Extended it's on these home.
Yes, and I'm getting, so this, the Boulder Lane is just off of 128 near Gordon College. Lot 1 is owned by the Brady Development Corporation, and lots 2, 3A, and 3B are owned by the town of Wenham. So if you can go to the next slide. So what can the town regulate in this process? We can impose an affordability requirement of up to 10%. Wenham already satisfies its affordable housing threshold, where I think we're at 12.7% or so. So we can also impose dimensional requirements like setbacks, building height, density, minimum parking requirements, site plan review, septic regulations, conservation. We cannot impose restrictions on age of occupants, number of bedrooms, size of bedrooms, or number of occupants. Next slide, please, State. So we are in the process of working on an amendment to the zoning bylaw for the proposed districts. That is still being revised. It will be available before we go to our public hearing and town meeting. But the proposed zoning so far includes a 50-foot buffer requirement, 2 parking spaces per unit, bicycle parking required, an open space requirement, an allowance for mixed use, but not a requirement. Site plan review is required prior to submission of building permits. Again, the 10% affordability, and the density in the 2 districts should be 13 and 17. We go to the last slide. So what are the next steps in this process? We will create these final districts and put them forward with a bylaw proposal and hold a public hearing on that. The final proposal will be submitted to the select board for inclusion on the warrant, and then we need to go to town meeting, and the town needs to vote as to whether they want to approve this or not. The special town meeting date will be approved. The vote to approve the proposed zoning will be simple majority under the new statute, not 2/3. That was part of the 3A. So with that, I think we'll move on to questions. So if you do have questions, as Chair Weeks mentioned at the beginning, please come up to the microphone, identify yourself, and we need straight address or street or something like that.
Yeah, we'll take addresses, thanks. And we're happy to hear from you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Tom Starr, 41 Pleasant Street.
Ooh, can you pull it up a little, Tom? It's not meant for someone your height.
Tom Starr, 41 Pleasant Street. Is that, I should shout still?
It-
So it sounds like you have a pretty good plan. Did you hear that?
Yes?
Okay. But so I just have some questions based on reading in the Globe, and there was a program on WBUR this afternoon. And one of the communities they talked about was Sudbury, which very creatively zoned areas of town where there already are apartment buildings. And that seemed to comply. So I wonder if that's something we can consider, like, I don't know what the areas would be. Would it possibly be Maple Street or Enon Village? I can understand why they might not qualify, but I just wondered if you could say anything about that type of strategy.
Well, as you heard, at least 4.8 acres of the district needs to be within half a mile of the station.
Right, so that you've got that
And we
covered,
don't
yeah.
have any apartment units within that part of town.
Right.
I suppose it would be possible to choose a different site from Boulder Lane. We felt like high density of 17 units per acre in the center of town might not be what the town preferred.
Right.
And I don't know the density of the Maples.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, there's 45 units at it.
You don't know the number of acres. We don't, and we can, it's a great question. We can figure out what the density there is.
Yeah.
Please,
So, and then,
Sorry, Tom, just to
we have one
Yeah.
more follow-up.
to add, one of the scenarios we did look at was the housing authority site at
Yeah.
Enon Village. So that was considered. One of the issues with that is the size of that site. I can't remember exactly, but it's 24, 25 acres. So it would have involved us having to create a district much larger than what our minimum would have been.
I see, okay. And then could you say, in your opinion, like how much development you think would eventually be built with the zoning that you're talking about?
Again, development requires a lot of things. It requires demand for housing, it requires financing, it requires water and sewer. And just because you zone something for 15 units an acre doesn't mean that that's what's going to get developed. And we, as the planning board, don't have any control about
Right.
that. All we can do is try to create a zone that will have the characteristics, the height limits, the setbacks, the screening, the parking, the bicycle access, maybe mixed use, that would be of most benefit to the town and that would fit in to the town's character. So we can do that, but we can't, predict what private people or developers will choose to do with that.
Right, so would you say, with the restrictions that you're planning to put in, that it could the development could either go the way of the units in Hamilton that you showed the slide of, which is more like an apartment building, but it also could be townhouses or like you showed in the second slide? Or is there kind of equal chance for either?
Well, if in the downtown area, it's 4.8 acres, right?
No.
And so it could be, I would imagine it would be more like the Willow Street kind of situation. I would hope that it would be a mixed use kind of thing to add to the commercial base of the town as well. I mean, I think that that's what we will put in that's what we're planning anyway, to put in is the possibility that could occur. But again, we don't have any control over what a developer comes in with.
Right. And this is another just question, was the shopping center considered, like, in other words, building another story on top of the shopping center, or is that just not possible to consider?
Well, the shopping center is actually in Hamilton,
The whole thing, yeah,
so
very confusing.
no, we can't zone Hamilton. And I don't know the answer to the obvious follow-on question, which is, what is Hamilton doing? I do know that Hamilton is considering a sort of comprehensive zoning exercise for their downtown area in general and factoring these state requirements into that. But they have more of a commercial base in that area than obviously than Wenham does. So we're sort of more looking at trying to do this greenfield, and they've already got property down there that's in the range, as you saw that Willis Street
Right.
apartment building in the range of this kind of density. So
Yeah. Yeah, I apologize. I came in a little bit late, but I think you were saying something about the train station being in Hamilton. Is that right? And so that we were an adjacent community rather than a train station community?
right, I think we are technically a train station community. The question was, or an adjacent community, but the question was, did we qualify as a small adjacent community, which would have gotten us significantly less responsibility? And because we have 111 acres in that half-mile area instead of 100 acres in that half-mile area, we don't qualify as a small adjacent community. Unfortunately, we tried to figure this out, and
Yeah.
the state has told us, nope, you're in.
Even,
So
okay, finally, I thought I heard that Wenham had joined the Rockport lawsuit. Is that true?
I think there were some Wenham residents who attempted to intervene and were denied access to that. But I think as a planning board, we decided that we don't want to spend the town's legal resources on non-compliance up front. If the town votes down the proposal that we put forward, then at that point we figure it out and we go from there. But we think that the best course of action for the town with the limited financial resources we have is not to engage in a lawsuit. If that might be fine for a larger community who has in-house counsel and resources, but not for Wenham. So that was a judgment call we made as a board to try to comply as best we can in the best interest of the town, and then put it out for the town to vote on and see where we are at that point.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for your work.
Of course. Anyone else?
Hi, hi, David Russman. I am.
Can you just state your
Oh,
address?
I'm at,
I mean,
10
I know where you live, but
10 Perkins Street. On the litigation question, I was going to ask if there is litigation over this issue and the validity of the statute. Can you guys expound on that a little bit?
there
the
is some
Rockport suit?
litigation ongoing. I don't know all the ins and outs and the immediate detail. I don't know if Dan, you want to give a shot at that? It's not my area, so.
Sure. Just as an overview, the litigation that has been in the news the most has been the town of Milton that refused to comply, and before that happened, the Attorney General threatened to sue the town if they did not comply. She has followed through on her threat. They are in litigation, and I believe, I know that Milton has answered the complaint. I'm not sure if they asserted counterclaims or not, but I know that they were pretty vigorous in the affirmative defenses that they asserted in the case, and they are represented by a large law firm in Boston.
Copeland and Page, I'm assuming a firm that does a lot of municipal law, I'm assuming. But do you guys know, is there a Rockport lawsuit too that the gentleman just referenced?
There is litigation in Rockport. It's a slightly different posture. I don't know all the details of the Rockport case. I do know that, as Ann said, there were a couple of groups who've tried to intervene as parties in that suit on the plaintiff side. There's a group of residents from Hamilton. There's a group of residents from Wenham. I believe their initial motion to intervene was denied, but I don't know if that's been entirely foreclosed or not. So, and other towns have taken a different path that have indicated that they don't intend to comply, but there's not other active litigation with them yet.
Is it true, I think, that the posture in Rockport is Rockport approved the kind of zoning that we're talking about for themselves, and then a group of residents sued the town over that action?
Yeah, I just don't.
We're not sure.
Okay, fair enough. No, I appreciate that.
But I can tell you that the Attorney General has taken the position that for the other towns that have said we're not going to comply, we don't have to comply until the end of this year. So she's taking the position that, well, technically you're not out of compliance yet, but when you are,
Right.
we'll do what we need to do.
I also think it is not clear what happens if we put forward an overlay zone, we approve it as a board, it goes to town meeting and it's voted down. I don't know if that puts us out of compliance technically, or if it's goes back to the drawing board and we're totally have to start again. And this is all green ground for under this, because it's a new statute and it's really just rolling out.
I was wondering, what if we vote and comply, and then the statute gets struck down? Can we rewind or unwind?
We can hold another public hearing to take that away if we decide we want to do that, but that's like 4 steps ahead
That's
of
down,
where we are.
that's down the chessboard. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Stacy Metternich, 3 Dexter Lane. So I guess my biggest concern is our infrastructure and the lack of it. I mean, every time we have issues with water, sewer, all that. I see one of the areas you are considering is Boulder Lane. I've heard that, you know, you're going to have to go through Beverly. Beverly has fought it. We can't develop in that area. And I know it's a proposed area and that all you're saying is it's a piece of land and that you're pre it to the state. But I'm still saying that there's been issues back and forth on that. And then to add to that, you know, Gordon College has sold some property and they're talking about developing that for, you know, a lot of units. So and that was denied so far. I don't know where it's at now.
We haven't had a proposal yet from them.
Okay. I know that preliminary said they did not have could not get
They
water.
don't have water. That's true.
So I'm just saying that we're a small town and we're having these types of issues with water, you know, the infrastructure, and I know it's hard that we need to get the funding from the state because we could, but at the same time, how far do we push back to say we don't have the water capabilities, the infrastructure to really comply if they push?
Natty. Mr. Chairwoman, we will switch.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah.
I think my colleague Rick Woodland would like to respond.
Hi, thank you for your comments. I'm very concerned about water and infrastructure.
I can't hear you. You're going to have
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please
How
speak
close
into
do I have to get? Okay, great. I can just talk really loud. You can hear me without the microphone. But I'm really concerned about water and infrastructure, water specifically. And in there's a funding bill before the state Senate today where they're trying to propose $1.2 billion in funding to extend the NWRA to some communities on the North Shore. The big problem is, we're right, we don't have water. So they are trying to fix those problems as well. Because if Beverly and Salem and Danvers are off the Ipswich River reservoirs, all the other small towns can then benefit from that as well. So water is a problem.
Yes, I did know about that. And I mean, I just think about when we had our drought and all the wildlife that were dying because of all the water that was taken out of the river. So I'm just saying that.
And also speak to your neighbors about reducing their water usage on their lawns. That's one of the biggest factors in all these towns on that.
Yeah.
So that's a concern too.
Okay.
I wonder if the water commissioner wants to have a word about this. I mean, I will just say that this is a zoning exercise. As we said, if a developer were to come in, they would have to find the water, they would have to find the sewer, they would have to get the financing, they would have to put a package together. And wherever we put this and whatever the details of it are, that's always going to be true. So what we've conferred and decided to do is to put something forward and give the town the opportunity to vote on it.
Yeah, I understand it's an exercise that you're doing, and I'm just, all right, to get to a point where the state's going to mandate, well, guess what? You're building on that area that you.
Well, again, it's not a mandate to build. It's a approval option to build if someone wants to. It's not a mandate. We don't have to build anything. No one has to build anything. But just to be clear about that, because I know it's tough sometimes to think about what zoning is and isn't. What it is an approval process, an opportunity. What it is not is a mandate to develop. And Dan has a follow-up point, I think.
So you've heard us say this is a zoning exercise, this isn't a building exercise, but you're still right to be concerned because the zoning part of this is creating by right zoning. So it means that we don't have special permit authority over potential developments that would be by right in the districts that we create. However, Ann is 100% right. This is not a building exercise. Whether you can build on Boulder Lane is not our problem. That would be a future developer's problem, or Larch Walnut. But it's even one step removed from a zoning exercise. What this really is, what we're doing is a compliance exercise. The state is requiring us to do this, right? So we are just putting forward this potential compliance model, right? This is what the zoning would be. Whether it actually gets built is several steps removed, so.
Thanks.
And I don't know if Ernest, do you want to speak to the water issue? Ernest Ashley, our water commissioner?
Thank you. Ernest Ashley, 9 Foster Street, and I'm
You're going to have to speak into the mic. I'm so sorry that it's
Ernest
very-
Ashley, 9 Foster Street, one of the water commissioners. And in general, our town has enough water, so our potable purposes, it's when we have irrigation that we start to run up against our limitations for pumping. But that said, we have considered the Pulte Homes proposal in a very draft form and decided that we did not have enough water for that type of size development. And something more limited within the town area, it may be something that we can have. But any major development will cause us to get close to a permit limit or, our withdrawal limits. So it would preclude additional development in town. And I think you mentioned Boulder Lane. Yes, our water system does not go quite that far. Gordon College is on Beverly Salem. The Pulte Home project approached the Beverly Salem Water Board about water and sewer, and they told them that they would not be able to provide that. So as Dan mentioned, for Boulder Lane, even if it was zoned as a potential, the developer would have to secure their own water ability before they had the ability to build on that lot.
Right. I think water is definitely a concern in this town. There's no doubt about it.
You mean?
Nancy Flynn, Sias Lane. A couple things people need to be aware of, and I apologize, I came in late, so if I'm being redundant, I apologize. One of the things people need to know is that each of these units is unlimited amount of bedrooms, an unlimited amount of occupancy, and the most important thing, we will be giving up our home rule. If we give up our home rule and we comply to this, we lose our rights and the state takes over all the rights within that zoning, and they can take people's private property by eminent domain. And once we give it up, we can't get it back.
Again, this is a zoning exercise. It's not a state, the state will not take any responsibility for the property. I asked, you may have missed this at the beginning of the meeting if you came in late. I asked everyone here to be courteous. Courteous to the people next to you, courteous to us. Thank you.
Salvatore Celeste, Joe Demo.
Thank you.
I'm looking at this, and I know you're talking about it's a zoning exercise. A zoning exercise.
It's so hard to hear.
There's absolutely no such thing as a zoning exercise. That's like opening up a door and saying, well, no one's going to walk through it. Trust me, I know a lot of developers. They'll walk through it. If you allow this to happen, it's going to cascade. I kind of remember when they told us they were going to take the Mass Pike toll booths off when the Mass Pike was finished. Never happened. Okay, I'm surprised I don't have one at the end of my driveway. But what's going to happen here is, right now, I think you're all being short-sighted. And the reason why you're being short-sighted is you're trying to avoid litigation, and punitive measures against the town. Now, we don't take any Massachusetts funding for any of these things. So they can't do what they're doing in Milton by holding $140,000, okay, I think for a wall, a seawall. Big deal, okay? $140,000 is nothing. And as far as litigation goes, if you think you have litigation or trying to avoid it now at the beginning stage, it's going to be worse down the road. Because as soon as you open the door to this, the reason why people come to Wenham and Hamilton is the school system and the rural suburban nature of this community. That's why they come here. Okay? If you take that away, what's going to happen is you're going to start seeing an influx of people that are going to create additional need and additional dependence upon the state government. And make no mistake, there are elements in the federal government and the state government that desire to either curtail or eliminate suburbia. This is one of the mechanisms that they use to do it. This, right now, you might be saying, oh, well, we don't want to litigate. Litigate it now. Litigate it now before it festers, before it gets worse. Because what's going to happen is down the road, the litigation is going to get worse because two things are going to happen. You're going to have a problem with your school system, you're going to have a problem with your infrastructure, and you're going to see a decrease in the value of your homes. People live here. This is a relatively upscale community. I moved here to get away from most of what you guys are getting ready to do. We have very little water. I can't even turn on my sprinklers, okay? I pay huge taxes for a garbage can that's about the size of my kitchen basket, okay? And you want to lay this onto us? Don't do it. This is a mistake. This is a really big mistake, and it won't end here. It won't. I'm looking at this, and I can see that there's not much in the way of the MBTA punitive problems, okay? But don't worry about litigation. Tell me what the upside is. Tell me what this will do for our community. I can't see it.
I think what we would like to do is put a proposal in front of the town and ask the town to vote on it. Everyone here can come and vote.
I understand
And I
that,
invite
but people,
you to do that.
Yeah, but you're painting it as, oh, this is just a proposal. It's really not anything. I know a lot of developers. As soon as you open this door and you zone that, someone will walk through it. They will develop it. And they don't care because when they come in here and it's an opportunity for multifamily units, it's worth putting in infrastructure, and they'll do it. And they don't care how they do it, but they'll get it done. And then the next round, what are you going to do with the next litigation and the next punitive measure when you are dependent upon the MBTA? When you do get these things because of the influx of people that you're bringing into the town, what are you going to do then? The litigation is going to be real big. Either that or your quality of your life is going to go down. That's what this is.
Thank you for your comment.
Kim? Yes, yes. Yes, that's it.
I just have a question, not necessarily for a response, but I'm curious. If, for example, it could be to you, and I'd love your response or anybody's response, because it's something I think about. The quality of life in Wenham and the possibility, as you suggest, that it could be diminished. School funding. So this is a question. Would we get state funds, maybe a discretionary factor in receipt of state funds towards a school? School's going to cost X number of dollars. We already have trash cans that are getting smaller and smaller, and we haven't even started that process yet. Are you willing to pay more for the new school because we don't want to have the development? And that's a question for everybody to consider. It's a hypothetical, I realize. I'm not trying to sway opinions, but I do sit here and think, if this goes down a path where increasingly funds that are potentially available to Wenham are pulled off the table because we do not comply, are we as a town willing to pay more for the projects?
That's the exact second.
And it's where we are.
Yes.
Well, we can't hear you without your microphone.
Get the mic.
And could you please repeat your name?
My name is Salvatore Celeste. I'm at 20 Puritan Road.
Thank you.
That is the track. I don't have any church. I don't have anybody in this. I don't have anybody in the school system. But yes, I am willing to pay more for that school because that school brings value to my home. That's what gives me my equity in my home. So yes, I would pay for that, and I don't even have any kids in this
And
in the school system.
just to qualify,
Right.
you pay more, you pay the decrement that we don't get from the state because we haven't complied?
But because we are not depending on the state for all of these things, we have a freedom that most communities don't have. I've been a lifelong resident of Massachusetts. I used to live in Peabody. And I remember when they started Cedar Pond Village, and they said, oh, it's just going to be a zoning thing, and don't worry about it because it's a wetland. It's a wildlife sanctuary. It was owned by East Magellan at the time. They sold it like that. And then they started building. And then you ended up with the tax base that you have in Peabody now, which just keeps on going up, okay? And the town is deteriorating. I don't know if you've ever gone through Peabody lately, but it's falling apart. And the reason is it lost its character of suburbia. Now it almost looks like inner city. And it's gonna happen here. And if you don't think it is, you're deluding yourself. Don't do this. It's a mistake. And I still wait to hear what the upside is. I've asked you all, what is the upside for these people here in this room?
The upside is
doing it.
complying with the law, and the upside,
That's not a law. That's not a law.
it is a law. It's a state statute.
Okay,
And
hold on.
I have asked everyone, please, to be kind to one another. We're a small town. We all have to live together. There's no point in yelling at us.
You're right.
Let me just respond to sort of the general theme of your comments and some of the comments I heard from the speaker before you. You said repeatedly, if you allow this to happen, I assume you mean the board sitting here. I just
continue contemplating this and allowing
okay.
it to
Just
progress.
let me respond.
In a false light.
Please,
In a
please
false-
let
in
the
a
board
false light,
members respond.
Let me respond. What we are doing, okay? We are facing a state mandate, and we are following a process, and we are going to put this in front of the town for the town to make a decision. It is not this board's decision about whether we are going to comply. Hold on. It's not this board's decision whether we are going to comply with MBTA 3A, okay? This has to be approved by the legislative body of the town, which is town meeting. So all of these arguments, I understand this is a hot button issue, okay? I'm not the biggest fan of the statute that came from the state either. It's forcing us to do something that we would normally do. However, let's get the characterization right. This is a decision for the town to make. We as a board are not making this decision. We're going to present a plan that would comply. The town is going to have the opportunity to either approve that or disapprove that. So before we start shouting from, the third or fourth row, wherever it's coming from, let's just be civil and courteous here and answer. This is supposed to be an informational session. Okay, so a lot of these things are better directed to town meeting.
I understand
And please come to town meeting.
Okay, and I will. But that's my point tonight. I'm not trying to dissuade you of anything. I'm not trying to stop a vote. But I'm trying to make people understand what I've seen happen in other communities. I've seen it, and it happens. And right now, the only thing you can say is, well, we're trying to be in compliance. What does that mean? Compliance. Because what are you going to get, a gold star from the mayor, from the governor?
No, we're going to get a town vote, which is what this deserves.
These people need to understand the consequences of this, because they're painting it you're painting it in a light that appears that it's just some kind of a cursory, well, yeah, we're going to zone it and we're going to allow it, as if it's never going to happen. It's going to happen. Trust me. Can I respond in? Yes. Yeah.
Hi, it's Angus West
I'm going to
from Walnut Road.
Respond to this. Respond to that.
We had the water department over here.
They did. They said we don't have enough water.
Okay.
I think we should take the stance, Bennett.
Angus West from Walnut Road. By the way, those of us in the back half of the room couldn't hear any of the comments up here, so I would like to know what was going on in the water board. First, I want to thank you.
Maybe I could suggest that they hear you, that they move forward,
Yeah.
if that's the
It's-
issue.
It's really hard to
Can't
hear.
hear
If
you
they
should
can move
move
forward,
forward.
then you'll be better hearing us. Thank you.
It's
I wanna-
actually hard to hear you.
Oh, is it?
Where we
Okay. First, I just want to thank you for taking on a thankless task. This is a highly divisive issue, and you're volunteers, and I hope everyone will treat you with respect.
Thank you.
I, too, as many in the room, are concerned about this, and I would think you'd like to be forearmed by the time you come to town meeting with this information. You very helpfully said there are 4 statutes that currently the statute that has been passed are using as a hammer on the towns, and 3 of those 4 have virtually no application to Wenham. The question, it's the upside, if there is any here, is actually avoiding the downside. You referenced the school budget, capital plans from the state. I'd like you to have asked town council by the time of the town meeting, what other weapons can the state legitimately use against us other than those 4, like denying us school building funds? It's how the federal government obviously gets at every state with its highway funds. You should be able to answer some questions with town council's help, and I imagine that's part of what's going to be litigated. Because if all we're going to lose is $100,000 of planning money, screw 'em. But that's how I look.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly, unfortunately, we're not sure at this point, because the Attorney General has not made it clear precisely
Purposely
whether she
ambiguous.
will stop at the language of the statute or continue,
So
as
we really need an
Margaret
opinion.
described, considering whether or not the town is in compliance in almost any arena where we seek funding.
I think
That's
we need
part of the
somebody, you might want to
calculus.
ask some of the other towns like Rockport and others to weigh in on that, to find out, because they can hire top legal talent to say, can this be challenged in court? All right, question 2. I've always taken comfort in Wenham being so damn wet that you can't build very easily. And we don't have city sewer. It stopped at the edge of Dodge Street when I was growing up, and that is really what's protected Wenham more than anything else, no sewer. I was shocked when you showed the picture of 19 units on Willow Street put in on 1 acre. I always thought that the Conservation Commission protected us because you literally can't have a septic field for 19 units on an acre. So is that the new technology, that you can actually put these 73 units on 5 acres and have the septic system underneath it, and the Concom won't be able to stop it? That's my first question.
I don't know if someone from the town wants to respond to that. Is there anyone, staff member here? I mean, obviously, they built those houses on Willow Street. I don't know if they're tied up to a package plant or what they have done there, but.
Since you were selfish, rather get a concept.
Yeah, it's definitely not a Conservation Commission issue unless there's a wetland involved. It's the Board of Health would have to approve any septic system that goes in.
So we're not sure what's going to happen on this 6.3 acres.
No, we're not sure. That's what I'm saying. We
It's-
cannot predict whether or not it's actually going to be
It
developed.
certainly abuts the wetlands that are part of the Miles River, right? It's right up against.
Yeah, you
that is
cannot
really wet
build
ground
on those.
where the gas plant is. All right, question 2, and this is really just color of what's happening around the town. I think somebody already mentioned what the heck Hamilton's going to do, but if we don't know the answer, it's going to have a huge impact with it. But the third part to the town, which may be bigger than this actually MBTA, is what Gordon is planning. And I think you may have answered it, but I couldn't hear because of the fan. What is the Toll Brother 350 unit or whatever the heck it is proposal? Where does it stand? What have you heard? Because this could be so much bigger than even this.
Okay, yes. What's Hamilton going to do? You might not have heard my response to that. I'll tell you what they're going to do. They're considering just basically an overlay of their whole downtown, right? Because they have that commercial area downtown, so they're considering folding this into all of that. And that's all I have. They haven't done much. They haven't taken community input yet, but that's what we understand. And as far as
Sorry, and we have tried to coordinate with Hamilton. We've made multiple outreach efforts. It's just,
yeah, they're just
it hasn't gone anywhere.
they're just not where we are right now. They're doing this in a different way. I think they're doing, what did you call it, Margaret? A unified zoning plan for their downtown?
I think they're looking at form-based.
Form-based code for their downtown.
I'm not sure what part of the downtown project.
Right.
But are they under the same timeline that we are?
Yes, they are. And as far as the Pulte Homes question, which has nothing to do with the MBTA zoning, but I'm happy to answer the question. There have been meetings with Gordon and Pulte Homes, but no application has been submitted to the planning board at this point. They don't have water, and they don't have sewer offtake.
And to respond to your first question, which was about litigation and what are the arguments, I think I would recommend that you take a look at the answer or the pleadings in the Milton case. Those are publicly available documents. And if you go through the town of Milton's answer, you'll see most of the arguments that would be presented, I think, in these types of litigations.
Do you want to summarize that question? No.
Yes, ma'am.
Marjorie Kajeski, 7 Perkins Street. I have 3 thoughts. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Number 1, my dad years ago worked his heart out to get out of the city, to build a house in Essex, to live in a small community. He did that. He worked hard. He earned it. No one built housing for him. Nobody. Okay? Number 2, I just heard about on Willow Street, when the 40B was being argued in Hamilton, that area on Willow Street was considered, and they said they could not do septic because they'd have to run it under Patton Park. So I don't know how the builders got away with whatever they did to put housing there.
The Willow Street site, just so people know, is behind where the Black Cow is. So it's
No.
this end. Yes, that picture is an
No,
infill.
Okay.
I'm just trying to explain where it is.
Maybe I am wrong. I don't know where they put it then. Anyway.
Me neither.
Okay. We have paid dearly.
What?
We have paid dearly and given up to live in this town. And we've been here 48 years. My main concern is that we already have water restrictions, and the size of the new schools will be increased by hundreds of millions of dollars, and probably need, I'm sorry, but I have to say it, interpreters, because you know who will be getting this housing. Okay? This all started when Biden's campaign promised that they would be bringing the cities into the suburbs, and no one was going to be able to stop it. So laws were passed, people were paid off, agencies formed, developers involved, and Biden still lets flow of millions of illegals.
Ma'am,
come
this is
here.
a state law. It has nothing to do with the federal government.
It comes from
Please
the
limit
federal
your
to the
conversation
state
to the
to
points on the
town.
table. Thank you.
Right, but these people are coming into our towns.
Could you specifically tell us who these people are?
We'll find out, won't we?
I
I'm
think you
just
know.
saying, everybody worked so hard to be here. Do we have to give up everything that we gave up things of ourselves just to be able to live in this town? I'm almost done. Biden started the housing crisis, and we will have to change our lives just because of him. It's not fair. I don't have to give up anything in my town. You should have the town we've always tried to keep up to. And just because it started at the federal level, they're dribbling it down into Massachusetts, and Massachusetts wants it. Who even needs to work? Who even needs to live by the MBTA? How do you know these people are going to work in Boston? How do you know? Aren't they going to have cars to drive to their own places? They will have cars. They'll have 2 cars. Actually,
Please
the
come
place
to
down
town
by
meeting and
128
vote.
Sounds pretty good because they can get in the car and get onto 128. I never had anybody help me get to my jobs. No, I didn't. I had to go to Reading once to work. And I hate to tell you why I had to go to Reading. Thank you. I hope people understand that we don't have to give up our town.
Thank you for your comments. Please come to town meeting.
Hi, Lori Heil, One Virginia. I have a question related to the towns that have done what you're all doing and done this exercise and voted, and it's been voted down. Have you connected with any of those town planners to understand if there's been any litigation or action taken against them? Because I'm curious, like I see the benefit of a wait and see approach, because once we do it, it's hard to roll it back. Are they getting how? I know towns like Milton that were just not even willing to put something forward and were
Right.
vocally against it were easy targets. But what are the towns where the people are?
I think that's what
Voting down.
happened in Rockport. I think they voted it in, and then a coalition of citizens filed suit. Is that right?
I'm unclear about the Rockport litigation. I thought there was some sort of change, but Milton initially approved, and then they held a special town meeting and voted against it.
Yeah, I feel like they made themselves a bit of a target by being so vocal. I'm
Well,
wondering
being
for the-
first.
by being first, and that's kind of my question, my point. So for towns that are gonna go ahead and put forth a plan and the town votes no, could you all take that as a homework to check in with those groups and saying, are you hearing anything?
Well, I
Are
think
there
It's a great comment. We can,
I would love
we
to.
have a lot of process ahead of us, and we can certainly do
That would be helpful. The other question I had, and David, I believe you mentioned school funding. As far as I understand, because I've been to all of the new school building meetings, that 75 million, potentially up to 75 million with the current proposed plan is committed. So are you saying with knowledge that that's potentially in jeopardy, or are you saying we don't really know? Because as far as I know, that one is already, if we were to vote yes on that, and I know that's a whole mess because Hamilton would need to vote yes on their planning because they are presuming the new school would be at Cutler, which means removing Winthrop. I know there's a lot of resistance to that. But assuming that's not the issue we're talking about, is funding really in jeopardy?
So I absolutely have no idea. I have nothing specific. That wasn't intended to be a scare tactic. It was more just a thought exercise for the community, which is to the point, we have a certain standard of life here. Are we willing potentially, hypothetically, to pay more for that if that is the case? Because I think that's an important exercise. And I just pivot slightly and say the following. Parallel to the MBTA 3A process, we've just gone through a 2-year master plan process in the town. And that is a wonderful document with a huge implementation plan. And I encourage everyone here to take a look at it because it really is a more in-depth consideration with a ton of town input into what is the future of Wenham. How do we preserve the characteristics that we care so much about while acknowledging that in recent history, our tax rate was in top 5 in the state when it was over $19 per thousand. And we have a vocal meeting tonight to talk about this, but then there's another vocal conversation about our tax rate. And so there was a great amount of consideration around fiscal stabilization for this town. How do we stop an out of control tax rate? How do we stabilize our fiscal condition in town? And as part of that, we considered the impact of land use and other strategies. We're at like 99 or 97% zone for residential. Residential, single family residential doesn't generate, it's probably the lowest use other than exempt properties of generating tax fund for the town of any format. And so we're considering what are other types of land use that would generate more net revenue for the town, one of which is mixed use development. It's not the only one. You can do commercial, we can do industrial, we can do anything we want within reason, but mixed use is an interesting way to potentially generate more net revenue for the town and also offering some diversity of experiences, restaurants, nice restaurants, places where the community can come together at town, these types of things, right? And we put together this plan, which again, I encourage everyone to take a look at, which thinks holistically about this town, about how do we preserve the history and the heritage of our town, the cultural institutions that go back nearly 400 years, while also considering that in 2024, whatever the cause, it is more expensive than ever to maintain this wonderful lifestyle that we have? And how can we move forward in a way that's more thoughtful about increasing net revenue into our town? One thing I'll say about 3A, what that jars me is the volume of potential development. But if we took a step back and wondered, well, what if there was a development on these parcels that was mixed use, that generated increased net revenue, which takes into consideration increased school participation, but still delivers more net revenue? At least that's what the model's shown that we retain from Cambridge Econometrics. Increases the net revenue to our town and increases the experience of town residents. So get away from the density and think about that. Well, we can't get away from the density because of what 3A requires, but it's still interesting to consider if we had a mixed-use development, where would it go? This is a more nuanced consideration than either we're a horse town or we're the next Peabody. Could we be something in the middle that also considers where our tax rate has been and where we want it to go? That was a lot. I apologize I made you all sit through that, but I just want to contextualize it within the master plan and encourage everyone to take a look at that document and join in on the implementation, because that's really what's happening over the next 10 years, irrespective of the 3A discussion.
Great. Can somebody find out if the $75 million is in jeopardy? Thank you.
Yes, we
Eric
can.
Tracy is...
I mean, I've been to all those meetings. Okay, thank you. Where can I look for an answer? On town page, or should I circle back with you directly?
When we talk to Eric, let's say if it is in jeopardy, I think you'd want people to know.
Yeah.
Right, but
And again, it's a hypothetical. It's because the Attorney General has not made clear what all this could be affected by this. We're not certain.
Right. And I guess I know you've reached out and there's been efforts to connect with Hamilton, but because both we have a vested interest in what's going on with them and what they decide, because we do share schools and libraries and other things. And so I will go to this and tell them we need to work together a bit more, because we can't have one voting yes and one voting no and expect to move anywhere on schools. And anyway.
Yeah, I think they're doing it differently because they have a whole different scheme. And they're, again, not starting from Greenfield the way we are. They're starting from a developed downtown. So,
yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Peter Gwynn, 7 Fairview Ave, Wenham. Been here 66 years. Went through the school system, put the kids through the school system, voted my share of overrides, loved the place. Here's my first question. I want to go backwards a little bit with your presentation. Is 3A, if it becomes law, the half-mile radius, do the residents that live within that half-mile radius, do they lose their zoning rights to the state?
no. 3A is law. The people who live within that half-mile radius, unless they're on the parcels that we're talking about the overlay zone on, and there's no one living on those parcels right now, are not affected by the zoning.
That's good to know, because a lot of us that are very nervous about this are worried about the future. If 3A, you're saying 3A is law.
Yes,
If
it's
3A is
passed.
implemented in Wenham,
Yes.
correct? I have the language right?
Right.
Say I lived at the old Prince property across from the Pingree Field, which is privately owned, the long brown fence on Main Street.
Yep.
It abuts the railway.
It's zoned commercial now.
It is. So that private residence, whoever it might be now, would they be subject to state rule on how they sell it or who they sell it to?
No.
That's great to know. Second question. The engineering drawings that the state has provided about 3A, about units, bedroom sizes, height, we've seen that from folks from Winthrop. They're documents that the state has that are theoretical drawings and engineering and architectural plans for units. I believe you said, some of you said in the presentation, some of those have no limit, I think it was one of your bullet points, have no limit to the amount of bedrooms that can be per floor. Is that true?
I think you may have misunderstood. I think what was said was that we are not permitted, and this is just a function of how zoning works
To manage
in
it.
Massachusetts. We're not permitted to limit it in that way. We can't do that. That's not within our
So
authority
Okay, understood.
anywhere in Massachusetts for any zoning.
Let me play that through theoretically. If all of us here, for whatever reason, if 3A actually implements in Wenham, those particular units, our fire, our zoning, maybe, our building inspector, if that developer decides to really put the minimum of what we saw in state documents, size rooms, I think it's, and I don't know for sure, but say 8 feet by 10 feet, you could have multiple families living in bedrooms. And that's a big fear that some of the other towns have had, especially Salem, of what's happened with some of these build-outs with the developers, that there's free reign by the developer through the state support to do what they want to do floor by floor in a unit. You heard anything about that?
Okay, so I don't know what I'm not privy to the documents you're talking about that the state has supplied.
I think some of
What
us
we-
can get them to you if you'd like.
We're more than happy to take any information people want to offer. But what we can do through this overlay zone is we can describe what the density is on the land, what the heights of the buildings are, what the setbacks are, what the general physical aspects of the proposal. We can also set up a process by which we get to review it and approve
Okay.
it, and approve it with conditions, approve it without conditions. We can do that as part of our zoning. We cannot specify the number of units, except in the density allowed on the property. What happens in town is not just the planning board review. There's also a water review. There's a fire review. There's a street department building, and the building code has to be met. So there's a whole several, maybe 10 layers of review that development goes through. It's not just the zoning, it's also these other factors,
Understood.
including the Board of Health.
And
So-
that sounds, that's
That's
a
how it
great
works.
That's how it works. What I want people to know in town, though, my understanding, which could be wrong, is that if a unit is built, the developer can start to develop how many they think they can sell for bedrooms per floor. I want my local friends and residents here in Wenham to understand, if that's true, you could have huge volumes of people living in single bedrooms that count as a unit. If that's true, I would encourage the board or others or residents, look into that, because the volume of folks per floor would be tremendous.
So I'm happy.
I'm sorry.
Let me just take this and then turn it to you. There is a building code. The building code has to be followed. It's a building inspection. So I'm not going to suggest that you're wrong, but I think
And
that
I'm not suggesting
building
I'm right. I've
code
been to
is
some
going to
presentations,
have a lot to say about this.
and I've
now-
seen these slides, and they're from the state. I would encourage you to look into that to see if it falls within the future of how this may go.
Thank you.
and whether it-
Thank you for that. Dan.
What I was going to say is part of this process is developing the zoning for the new district, which we haven't done yet. It's in process. But to answer your question, I think the limiting factor on what your hypothetical is suggesting is going to be septic. Like, I don't think you can have an unlimited
That might
number.
offset if that's,
Right.
But
I don't
Board
think you
of
can have an
Health-
unlimited number of bedrooms
Okay.
in a unit because of the septic restrictions.
but I would encourage everybody to continue to ask about that.
Thank
I hear
you.
you and I understand. The third point I just want to make is it seems to me that it would be impossible that if 3A as law becomes Wenham, it will be impossible for us as townspeople to forecast the property tax increase down the road. There's so many other things that are on our plate. The impact to increase taxes to support such of a build-out. I heard this gentleman talk about possible net revenue. Do we have formulas on that? Do we know that? Great. Then direct me to it. Love to see it.
It's in the master plan and
Okay.
particularly the Cambridge.
Because it
econometrics
seems overwhelming when we consider the school district and its needs at 70+ cents per dollar of Wenham taxpayer dollars. The future of infrastructure support might be unbearable to many, regardless of their home income. And to move forward on such a thing with no real understanding of what predicting the future might be, like maybe 10 years from now, how are we going to get rid of the turf over at the regional because it can't be recycled? Other challenges that are ahead of us and they're dealing with right now. This amount of infrastructure potential, it's hard to believe there would be a net gain on it, but I don't know. Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Maybe it's an idea.
I really need to suggest that you look at the master plan and the econometrics report, because we've done a lot of work trying to think these questions through, and I appreciate your comments about them.
Great, thank you.
And just general background about 3A. It was approved by Governor Baker in, was it 2021, Margaret?
Yep.
2021?
This is a
Yeah.
Charlie Baker thing.
Yes. Thank you, Charlie. So, yeah, I just have a follow-up about the master plan, and I appreciate David's comments, but I'm seeking clarity on this because when I looked at the Cambridge econometrics, and I was there when they made the presentation, it seemed to state quite clearly that we would need to have develop over 1 million square feet of commercial space to reduce the tax rate by $1 per thousand. So I don't know if there's some way that you could calculate if there was mixed use on these 3A properties, just what benefit we would get, but it doesn't sound like it would be substantial.
I think the point is it would be better than just the residential alone. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
But David, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think 2 points. One, a mixed-use development is not going to, a single mixed-use development is not going to stabilize our fiscal situation. The Cambridge econometrics report was eye-opening in kind of adjusting my understanding of the amount of different types of development that would be necessary to change the tax rate in a very significant manner. But my thinking was tempered by my colleagues who were like, it's not an all or nothing. We get into this room and we have fierce conversations about whether or not we're paying too much at $250,000 for radios for public safety. Well, 4 buildings, according to Cambridge econometrics, of mixed-use developments could provide those radios for $250,000 in net revenue. So to me, it's not a question of is it going to solve us or not? But that's also not why I bring it up. I also bring it up because in the greater context of the master plan, which again involved however many hundreds of touch points with the community, there was an overriding sense of many things, but one of which was the condition of the community and the opportunities for engagement. And again, we are a single family house developed community. And as zoned, the question is, do we want to have other types of developments which are more net fiscally positive for the town, but also offer a more complex and enjoyable experience for its residents? And so I think we want to consider that as well. Leave aside the 3A. On the property on Main Street, the horse farm, would we ever want a mixed-use development there? Would we want shops along the street? I'm not saying we do or we don't. I'm just saying this is the conversation and the evolution of this town as we look forward, which isn't just about experience of residents, but also about fiscal stabilization.
Yeah, I mean, that horse farm is a really sensitive topic, especially because it's continuous with the historic Civil War training ground. And, there have been many cases like in Pennsylvania around Gettysburg and things like that, where there's been opposition to that kind of development next to a historic site. So I know we're between a rock and a hard place, I kind of get that. But
Well, here's the one thing I would suggest for everyone to consider. Like, think about if you're sitting on a parcel of land that's zoned commercial when 99% of the town is not. In Wenham, that's a pretty significant thing to have on your hands. So as a town, and for all of us sitting in this room, do we want to wait to see what that owner decides to do with a private developer for which we have no control? Or do we want to give a strong indication and suggestion, this is what the town consensus would like for a new use of this parcel? I wish this town would stay in its current form forever. I moved out here, I thought I'd found a Norman Rockwell painting come to life. There is no graffiti in this town. You see respectful children that say hello to you. We're doing something right here. I wish it would never change. But I also hear everyone say consistently, the taxes are too high.
Right, but the taxes did just come down, right?
But the assessments went up.
Well, that's the way it works, though. I mean, that's why I don't live in Manchester, for instance. But it's a trade-off. I mean, I used to live in Greenwich, Connecticut. Very low taxes. I couldn't afford to buy a house, but it's a very nice community.
I really want to encourage everybody to look at the master plan one more time. I think that really...
Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. I really want to encourage everybody to look at the master plan again. Those are your hopes and dreams for Wenham, and it may be in conflict with 3A, but it really is what I think we believe through our subcommittee, the impact, where Wenham wants to go through all the hundreds of touch points. That's really what the planning board was focused on. That's why I became involved with the planning board 2 years ago, was to work on that master plan to get the future together. So then we're united and talking about things like this. Thank you. Please read it.
I know you guys are thinking, I'm not this guy again. But
Oh, we love
I
you.
still didn't get my question answered. And
Which
here's-
is?
And here it is. Calm down. Well, here's what the situation is. I've asked a simple question. What is the upside of us doing this to these residents here that currently live here? Wait, don't do that. You're telling me that there could be punitive measures, and you don't know if it's going to be for the school, and you don't know if it's going to be for this or that or the other thing, because there's that and also insurance at this point. You don't know if any of those things affect anything. So as we're standing here right now, the only thing that you can say is we want to be in compliance, okay, because we want to avoid punitive measures, okay? Great. Other than that, please tell me, what was the upside? Because if you're saying mixed use, and we want to bring that into the town, unless Raytheon moves into the first floor of the duplex, we'll bring that parcel of land. It's not going to change the tax base. I believe this be. That's why we hire industrial. No, that's what I'm anyway.
Do you want the answer? What the upside is?
So tell me what the upside is.
The upside is if we move this forward, the town gets to vote on it.
That's not an upside.
That is an upside.
No.
It's a democracy. That's an upside.
That's evading the question. I understand it's up for a vote, but people need to understand what
The upside is we need housing, and there's a parking lot sitting there empty.
We don't need housing. The state needs housing, and the federal government wants
Right,
housing.
we means the collective we, not
We're
you
not
and me.
the collective we. We moved to this bedroom community because it is like Norman Rockwell's community. That's what we came here for.
I agree with you.
So tell me what the upside is that we're voting on.
I've told you what I believe the upside
you
is.
just told me that we're going to vote.
I don't think you agree with me about the upside, but that doesn't mean that's not an upside.
Do you understand what I'm saying? What is the upside? When someone says, just use candy, and you eat it, it's going to rot your teeth out. Okay, well, the candy's good, but it's going to rot your teeth out. Tell me what the upside is here. If they do this thing, how do these people benefit from it? Are their taxes going to go down? Is their right to work going to be any better? Are they not going to be able to turn on their sprinklers anymore? Are they going to?
They're not going to have their tax money go to a frivolous lawsuit or have to fight a state lawsuit that we don't need to fight.
But you're going to end up fighting it later because what's going to happen?
Well, excuse me. That's the point. I don't understand that. Well, why
We don't
do
agree
you
with that.
automatically think that we're going to end up in litigation?
You're the ones who are assuming that you're gonna.
No,
No,
we're not.
only if we don't
Why do
comply.
you want to go into compliance with this? Tell me why you
Because-
need to be in compliance with this.
Because why
What are you
not?
going to get?
Why not put this to the town for a vote? Why shouldn't the whole town get to vote on this?
But if the town votes, tell them what the consequence of their vote is. What is it? Tell me. I don't understand
The
it.
consequence of the vote is a zoning overlay district on 4 acres in downtown and a zoning overlay district on
And if
how
they
many
do
acres?
that-
12 acres out by the highway.
And if they do that, what's the potential? What's going to happen next?
Let me try to answer.
Nothing?
Let me try to answer your question of
This is
potential.
important to me. That my house is one of my
Yeah,
largest.
we're trying to answer your question.
And I see this hurting my value of my home.
Okay, give me a minute. So part of the master plan is introducing mixed use, as David said, trying to introduce more housing in the downtown area. It's not
Why?
It's because that
that's
is
what
part
the
of the town's master plan. It's the vision for the plan for the next 10 years, because that's something the town has decided that it wants to do. So, so I'm not saying it's 100% overlap, but you're asking me what's potentially the upside here. Potentially the upside of that 6.3 acre parcel, and frankly, I'd prefer it to be 4.8 if we could do it, but we couldn't do it under the guidelines, so it's 6.3. But it's in a uniquely situated area where it's a very good area actually for this type of housing, and if it could be mixed use, even better. It would be nice to have more restaurants and shops in that area. It's centrally located. You can walk to the train. I think your question is a little different though, which is what's the upside of us going through this process? Well, for one thing, process matters. Okay? And the default position right now is this is the law of the Commonwealth.
I'm not asking about the process. I'm actually asking about
I'm answering your question. We listened to your question. Please let me answer. So part of the upside is the process itself. I know a lot of people think that's abstract and it doesn't matter, but it does matter. And that's why we have boards. That's why we're going through this whole exercise, okay? Another part of this upside is we as a town get to vote, and you get to exercise your democratic rights, okay? If you don't like this, vote against it at town meeting, okay? That's another upside of this. Another upside of this, and I know you've tried to diminish this, there are consequences if we don't comply, okay? I'm not opining about what the Attorney General's authority is, but she has made it very clear as the chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth that she's going to enforce this statute, whether she has the authority or not.
That's the stick. Where's the carrot?
Hold on.
Well, I think Dan gave you some carrots. I don't think you agree with the carrots he's giving, but that's a different matter.
So the fact that if you get sued for being out of compliance, then there would be litigation costs, right? That's a downside. Avoiding a downside is an upside. Now, I'm not telling you how to vote on this. I'm not, saying you should approve this. All we're saying is we've done the best job that we could to come up with a model that would comply. The decision is going to be the town's. It's not our decision.
I understand that. What I'm asking is to make sure that the people understand the consequences of it, not just what happens if we don't do it and the Attorney General's office and the governor's office gets mad at us and we have to go through some litigation. It'd be less litigation now than to litigate this after you've already done the
I think that's highly speculative, and I don't think we really know the answer.
the rest of it.
I don't think we really know the answer to that. I think we have made a choice that we're going to go through the process, and I appreciate your comments that you don't happen to agree with that decision. I totally appreciate that.
Just asking for an answer.
I'm taking under advisement from listening to you that what we need is a fully fledged presentation for the town meeting with this is what it could look like, this is what could happen, and we will do that.
Okay.
Hello.
I'm not going to beat you up.
No, that's okay. I have a thick skin. Please tell us your name and your address.
Courtney Ashwood, 49 Porter Street. I hear all this talk about mixed development and net revenue. And so I've been talking to Hamilton FinCom, Hamilton Select Board too, And it tends to go round and round. I was given information that the 18 units on Willow Street generated around $60,000 in property taxes. That's really low. I mean, if there's even 10 kids in that building, it's $20K to educate a kid in the Hamilton Wenham School District.
Can I ask a clarification? Just because I don't know the answer to this, and I'd like to. Was that just for the residential piece or also for the commercial piece? Because there's a commercial piece on the first floor that I don't think has opened yet.
Okay, I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Sure. So when I talk to FinCom, they say, well, we're looking at the cost to build a new school, not the budget to educate all the influx of students who come into the town. That's the responsibility of the school committee. And then when you go to the school committee, they haven't run any of those numbers. They're an independent government. It's, really trying to see how this would financially play out. It would be so helpful if these committees and boards talked and figured out what's the break point for how many kids come. We're going to build a school for 740 students and need to build on at this rate that all these developments we're talking about. So I just wanted to point that out.
The only thing I would say about that point is just to make sure we're all thinking the same way. If there are 18 housing units that is net generating revenue, that means it is categorically different than a subdivision, which is, according to the Cambridge Econometrics, would be a net cost on the town. So a mixed-use development that is 18 housing units that is generating net fiscal contribution to the town is a better thing than, so Cambridge Econometrics, take a look at the report, would tell you that a single-family home has a net cost on the town. And so that would say actually that development is paying for itself. It's only Cambridge Econometrics, but we defer to them as the experts. So just so I understand, we look at it like, oh, $16,000. What's that?
60, I think.
60,000. What's that? That means it's paying for itself with a net kicker into the coffer with 18 housing units. So that is kind of a good thing.
Yeah, but I'm paying for the education of the kids, the teachers' pensions, the teachers' contracts, fire, police, water, sewer, all of it. So all of it matters to the residents.
But they are too. That's
I get it, but $60,000 for the amount of people that might actually be in the building.
Well,
If you had,
for me in my house, my single-family home, I cost the town according to this 16,000. We all do. Everybody in this room.
I understand that. I just don't agree that we can develop our way out of this. People pay a higher tax for quality of life too. Going in what you're getting.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
I hear that point.
I have one that about the office that could go back. How much is that? Would be section that. How much is the thing?
we don't, the zoning doesn't have anything to do with Section 8.
Yeah, that, but if they started building, how much of that was after the Section 8?
None of it would have to be Section 8.
By Section 8, are you saying affordable housing? So the cap is 10%. Now, we should be very proud in this community because we are over 10%, which not only means that we're contributing to the greater good of having affordable housing, but there's also not the right to have Section 40B by right development in this town. And compare that with our neighbors in Hamilton, which are at 5 or 6%, which leaves parcels that open to by right development by 40B developers. So we would absolutely want to have 10% of the development be affordable housing for a variety of reasons. But one of which would be to make sure that we stay over that 10%, because that's something that our community should be very proud of.
And we avoid 40B that way.
Right.
So difference between what 40B is and that's like, because it's a very big.
Yeah, Section 8 is a federal subsidy for the people who live there, not the units that's built.
You can make, by North Shore standards in Essex County, you can make about $75,000 a year, have one child, and qualify for affordable housing. So the limits here are very high to get in there. So we're not down at the Section 8 level when we talk about affordable housing.
The suggestion is that does affect the assets a Section 18 for essentially states like.
Those are two different things, though, so I wouldn't mix them up. We have someone at the microphone?
Let me just clarify one thing. The term cap at 10%, 10% is what we are allowed to require.
Under the zone.
Under this
zoning.
3A.
Can't
Okay,
require
which
more.
we would want to do. Right.
Hi, I'm Elise, and I'm at 114 Larch Row. And my question is, I'm looking at this flyer, and it says, if it were to pass, the minimum we have to comply is 365 units, 24 acres. It says minimum. So what's going to prevent a developer from coming in? Let's say I live in this half-mile radius, and I can then turn around and sell my unit to a developer who will then come to you asking for a variance to also do
No.
multifamily
Let me explain. The zoning overlay goes over a certain amount of land, and the density that's allowable within that district would permit a certain number of units. The total number of units, the minimum amount is this 365
It
spread
says
over the
minimum
two.
now. So
But
if-
we're not going to zone above the minimum amount. We're zoning at the very minimum we can do and still be under
But
the
there's
radar.
nothing in here that caps it so that a developer can't
No,
come in.
the zoning overlay would cap it.
The
That's the-
minimum,
so
the
that's
minimum
the zoning.
numbers, those are the minimum thresholds that we have to meet in order to satisfy the state requirements. So we have 1,460 total dwelling units in Wenham, and we have to zone for 25% of that, which is 365. That's
the state.
Does that clarify?
But I'm saying that if it passed, say I live near the train station. I don't live near the train station, but I live near a train station, and not really happy with what's going on. Well, I'm gonna try to make what I can. I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm
If you don't own a parcel that's got the overlay on it,
but I can apply for a variance.
So when
And you've
when
set
we-
precedents.
when we propose
Set
the-
precedents.
when we propose these two districts, okay? So in the 6.3 acres, right? That will be zoned
that
for
slide back
a total of 73 units. Okay, that's the maximum that can go in there if it gets approved. So a developer can't come in and say, I want to put 146 because it's not zoned for that.
And then you went on with tips and that.
Does that answer your question?
No, I'm just saying, like, there's mostly everything is single-family homes. What's to stop a developer to say, I want it to be a multifamily. I want to put an ADU.
because the zoning doesn't permit it except on those parcels with the overlay.
Can someone ask for a variance?
They can, but we wouldn't.
And you set a precedent.
You wouldn't say, they can't ask for a variance from the zoning. They can ask for a variance within the zoning. So in other words, if the parcel next to it is zoned for 1 unit per acre, they can't ask for 15 units per acre there. Do you see what I'm saying? It's only on the parcels that we're putting the overlay on where that density would be permitted.
No, I know it's
zoning is-
I've seen developers, when they have deep pockets and they can
I
make
would like to
planning
cut off the
boards-
suggestion that anyone on this committee is subject to that kind
No,
of.
I'm just saying that developers find a way to push the limit. How about?
Okay, so this is stationary, but it's the parcel, Kate.
Yeah.
The parcel, the yellow one first. Oh, that's fine.
Nope.
No, the parcels,
The battery.
metals.
Then
The two dendro,
third in.
that's not bad, that's it. So those are the parcels that would be excluded. They're right near the train station. No one's living on them now.
Well, okay, well, we'll see it when I believe it.
Please come to town meeting.
One more question, I'm sorry.
It's okay. No apologies.
Is there, I think earlier, hours ago, there was a reference to the amount of parking, like I think it was 2 spaces per unit. Is there other things that you guys could do to discourage development? Could it be 4 parking spaces per unit or whatever it might be?
I mean, we have control over a lot of the design elements. Yes, we can do things that would make it, at the very least, a very high-end looking development.
And is 2 parking spaces in that,
We don't have we haven't voted on an overlay district yet. We don't have any of the details. We have a draft that we're talking about, but don't get hung up on the details of it at this point. That's part of the process we have to go through over the summer, is trying to figure out what it should look like and how much setback and how do we buffer it from that. Should there be, 50 feet of vegetation between whatever this is and the thing that's next to it? That kind of conversation is still to be had. So we could do 2 units, we could do 5 units, we could, 5 spaces. I mean, we could do 1 space. That might be even more discouraging because it's supposed to be for transit. So if you're taking the train, do you need 2 spaces? We have to have those conversations. We haven't had them yet.
Thank you. There'll have to be traffic studies analysis too by the potential developer to see if that traffic can handle it, if the streets can handle it. There's a lot to go into it, not in infrastructure. So there's a long road for anybody.
Limited to zoning, it's level. Right. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Alex Schmidt. I live on Main Street, and when I'm just kind of following up on this gentleman's conversation or his topic, I think you mentioned earlier that you had gone back to the state and said it was 111 acres, and because of that, we now have to have 25% of our current population or number of housing units.
We're not an adjacent small community, basically. We don't meet the definition.
Wondering, it seems to me like it's a pretty simple no from the state, given all that they have to deal with. And I don't understand the process of what they said. I think at the previous meeting regarding this, it was if we lost 10 acres, the number of units would go from 3 whatever down to 100. Is there a way to explore that a little bit more?
Someone would have to step up and buy 10 acres.
Well, but I mean, maybe is that a community fit? We make it a community park and everybody buy, whatever, take donations and limit that. Just a solution. And I'm thinking about it, but
if you have a great idea, run with it. It's not within our authority to do that.
Okay, well, I'm just kind of trying to figure it out. I also wondering,
we have looked into that issue. And part of the problem is even if more than 11 acres were sold, there's no guarantee that the state would say, oh, now you're under 100 acres, because they could say, no, we made our determination at X date.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next part is I get what you guys are doing. And frankly, I know we don't generally, people here are opposed to what the state is asking. We have to go through this because it will come to us at some point. In your proposals, what you're going to give to the town, have you considered going back to the state with something that's not 100% of compliance, i.e., look, we disagree on the 100 acres, and therefore the number should be X. And as an option, is there a way to kind of fight City Hall here or no?
I mean, on that front, it would just be, look, we don't like your definition. We think we should really be a adjacent small community. And even though we're 111 acres, we really shouldn't be, right? I mean, I think I know what the state's response to that one is going to be.
I'm just trying to find the options to say, look, guys, we want to comply to what we would like. And we don't agree with what you're going to mandate. Is there some middle ground? And I don't know that the process has worked its way through, i.e. Milton hasn't solved it or Rockport hasn't solved it, but maybe with time, the governor or the AG would say, all right, look, they made a valiant effort. Let's give it to them. I'm just trying to throw out ideas here.
Yeah, I think we are going to get a lot of... Hold on.
Yes.
We are going to get a lot of...
count.
We are going to get a lot of answers from the litigation as the litigation plays out, but we have explored all kinds of things. For example, we share this station. Part of the station is in Wenham. It's in both Wenham and Hamilton, but we share. I think we're probably the only communities that share an MBTA station under this act. And if you look at our area, right, we don't get a full circle. We get maybe half a circle.
Yeah.
So we're in a unique circumstance, and we've looked into that as well, and
that's my point. Is that this is a state one solution for everybody.
Yeah,
correct.
And that's not, we shouldn't fall into that category.
We agree.
If there's a way to fight or modify it to our benefit, no, we want to, well, just
That's, you
something
have
to
to,
explore, just trying to come up with.
yeah, I think that's a lawsuit, and I don't think that's what we want to do right now. I think we would prefer to put something out to the town and see what the town does with it, and then go from there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Quick clarifying question. I think, Dan, it was you mentioned we need to have 4.8 because of the parcel size at 6.3.
Yes.
Could we not subdivide a lot?
No.
That's part of what's required.
That's part of the state guidelines as to how we can go about this process, which is something that's being challenged in one of these litigations. So there were these guidelines that came out, right, Margaret, as to how we go about this and how we can determine. And one of the things they said is you can't split your lots. So we needed to use the 2 lots to get over 4.8.
Yeah.
But the combination gets us to 6.3.
And that, again, is as of the day that legislation was enacted, that's where they're locking in lot sizes. I mean, we can split lots.
I don't know when the guidelines came out. I'd like to be able to split lots, frankly, because we could do it at Boulder Land as well, because we have, I think, more acreage than we need at Boulder Land, but just because of wetlands and other things, we have to use, I think, all of the lots. My understanding is the guidelines came out from an agency after the legislation. So the legislation was enacted back in 2021. And then in this process, I'm not even going to try to guess which agency because they keep changing their acronyms, but somebody came out with these guidelines as to what this process was and what we could do for picking parcels and coming up with districts that would be compliant. And we worked with a consultant who guided us through that process.
Got it. It's complicated.
Yep.
Agree. And I actually like the suggestion that was just made. At some point when towns are coming back, where you guys are doing your job, which is a tough job, towns are voting no, they will need, I think, to be more flexible to get moving in the right direction. And so I think it would be great to have in our back pocket some scenarios and understand what the litigation consequences would be so we could weigh, okay, we need to do something. What our alternatives something might look like and a principled reason. So something like hey, we're just barely over that 100 and we share a station and we have a half circle, arm all of that case to say, here, if we find that litigation and all those things are untenable to staying no, mm-hmm. Coming up with some creative ideas and creative thinking for what we would say, all right, this would be what we could put forth and something that would be much more in line with town interests.
Really, it's the same thing with a different density.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a hard thing to have alternatives. We could do that, but it wouldn't be, the alternative wouldn't be no zones. The alternative would be a zone with lower density.
I agree. At this point, it feels like moving quickly, a yes vote quickly doesn't necessarily serve us unless we understand.
Right. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. For us, this doesn't seem quick because we've been talking about this. We've had these same conversations with each other for the last year and a half. So
in their December 31 compliance timeline.
Right. I understand it.
They're going to need towns to, if they really are wanting to do this, they're going to need to do something.
I really like your idea of, okay, so this is what it looks like if we fully comply. And if we were an adjacent small community, this is what it would look like.
Something that they're going to need some wins on the board for towns that are voting no to take back to the other towns. So if we can be their prize to give them something
that might be our alternative if it gets voted down. I appreciate that thought.
We love that great hands. Let's see.
Andrea Van Boven.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your name.
Andrea Van Boven, Middlewood Drive. Thank you. You've worked really hard, and I really appreciate everything that you've done and are doing. I think, to your point, we really have to be engaged in the process. We have to get more people engaged in what you're doing. And so for us to do word of mouth, how can what are you doing to keep things online? What are you doing so that we can, because not everybody's schedules fit. What's the best way for us to engage more people?
Do you want to take this one? I mean, we have a space on the planning board site where all this information will be posted. It's online. It's on the town website. We meet every second Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. I can tell you this is going to be on our agenda. It's going to be about the details, though, not about, yes or no, I have to say, that although I'm hearing everyone here. And then Margaret can talk to you a little bit more about accessing town resources and staff. And
Yes. If those things could be put up, we can all go to the planning board or go to one place and then
Well, you can go to the town's website, and on the front page, we have an MBTA communities link. We've also sent it to all of our social media outlets. I think we do Twitter, Facebook. Kate's been handling most of that. Instagram. We put it on the sign in front of the fire station. We do as much outreach as we can. We haven't spent the funds on a direct mail for this. In the past, we've done that, and we found that wasn't.
Like for town meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For town meeting, there'll be.
Right. Town meeting's kind of late because process is really important. I've been through a lot of process stuff and walked people through things, and there's still people that are outraged and surprised.
Right,
They don't have the
and
information.
we can only do what we can do. And we encourage people in the room, if you feel strongly about this, to organize with your neighbors. I mean, that's part of the democratic process.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I encourage that. I also want to say for the question about the school committee, that is the two-town thing, and they're making a vote on what kind of school they want us to have tomorrow night.
Right.
In town meeting in that room.
Right.
So I encourage anybody who's still hanging in on camera,
Right.
wherever to attend.
Well, that's the other point about the planning board meetings is they're also, we do them in person since all the restrictions are lifted, but we also have them on Zoom so you can participate remotely as well.
Okay.
And the link is in the agenda, which is posted on the town's calendar.
Okay. I appreciate that. And keeps up to date.
I said one question.
Yes.
With the map, this is a half a mile radius?
Correct.
Okay. It's cut in half. Hamilton is one half, Wenham is the other half.
Correct.
It's one train station.
Correct.
Why isn't it considered Hamilton and Wenham having to do this much and not each town do 100%? Has anybody addressed that?
So Hamilton has to meet the same obligations we do. Their numbers are much higher. I think that they have to. Well, I understand.
Right. So add it together.
Within their half of the circle, they have to. I don't know. I had their numbers before. I don't know precisely what their numbers are. I think that their total units are 735 or something approximately, which means a smaller number of those have to be within the circle. But they have to put more. I'm sorry. They have to put more than 4.8 acres within their half of the circle.
So it's not split 50-50 for Hamilton, Wenham?
No, because Hamilton has more. Hamilton has a higher housing inventory stock than we do. So we have 1,460 units. Hamilton has more than that. We have to zone for 365 units. They have to zone for 700 plus units. So
all within a half?
No, not all within a half.
No, they can put some of them as we have out further. Like we've put most of ours out on Boulder Lane, not
It's
that
an
town.
MBTA thing. One train station should have, okay, within this half and a half.
You would think so, but that's not how the act works.
Check on that, please.
Yeah, we did. We did.
It's not fair. Two small towns having double. I only in one.
Yeah, but we agree with you.
Want to double check it?
We can quadruple check it. We've already combed this in the last year and a half. We have had a conversation with Hamilton, yes. And what we've learned is that they are doing this different kind of zoning exercise that governs their whole downtown, and they're sort of incorporating this with that. So it's just...
I could call you here. It's an imaginary board.
Right, I understand that. Believe me.
I do. I think a lot of the, well, I'm not going to say it. A lot of the tax burden might be alleviated if we weren't two towns, but we are. And that's the way it is.
Moving similarly to this, you know,
It's different because they're using a different process, so I can't really answer that. But they're going to have to comply by December 31st, just like we are. Yes.
Yes, Peter Gajeski, 7 Perkins Street. I have a question on affordable housing and a few other questions. You said it's 12.7, correct?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
Affordable housing right now, we have 12.7. We're over the 10% cap, correct?
Yes, we're over our threshold.
Okay. You said that's not going to increase if you put 1,000 people in?
So the MBTA Communities Housing Act is not, I know it's been billed this way in the media, and the administration has.
Pull it up if you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, I know the governor's office has at various points portrayed it as an affordable housing, but it's not an affordable housing act. It's just a housing act. We are allowed to impose a requirement of 10% into these zoning districts, but we can't go higher than that.
Correct. But if we put 1,000 people, is it fair to say 365 units will be 1,000 people or more? Is that fair to say?
Not necessarily, no.
We don't know.
it is.
Okay, it's a good
Well,
estimate.
that would
That's 2.5
be
people.
if there were 3 people per unit in every
Correct.
unit. But if that might be a
Yes, would have
maximum.
Assuming that they're all built.
Exactly.
Right.
So
So
that
that's
seems-
like the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is
Do we
much
have
less
any
than that.
idea when these are built, who's going to be moving in?
We don't have any idea about
Is it gonna be a
whether
priority?
these will be built.
I mean, we can put senior citizens in there, we can put veterans in there, we can't teach our people.
We are not permitted, as you heard, to qualify other than allowing for 10% affordable who lives in the units. We can't put an age restriction on it. We can't put any kind of restrictions on it.
I guess the point I'm trying to get at, okay, was the Gordon Conwell Middle Street in Hamilton, which we paid the school bills, and it was in Wenham. Usually it was about 30, 35 children every year. The people from overseas, Africa, Asia, everywhere would come in, and they send the kids to school. And I think 7 or 8 on average always had special needs. Fine. State doesn't give us a penny. Gordon Conwell never gave us a penny. All right? There was one individual who came over here with his wife, and he had, I believe, a girl and 2 boys. All 3 were special needs. They were only here for 2 years. Okay? Only here for 2 years. It cost us $100,000.
I don't think this has anything to do with our zoning exercise. I
No,
know
but
you
what
don't
it's
like the
getting
word,
into,
but we
who's
can't
gonna be
control
living
that.
there? The point I'm trying to get, who is going to be living there?
We don't know.
Okay, that's all I need to say. So we
Thank
don't
you.
know.
That's the answer. I mean,
It's a
we
pig-
don't know whether units ever will be built.
Okay. It's a pig in a poke. We don't know.
So I think those are school committee questions. They're not,
Definitely.
they're not planning,
They're not
trust me, they're
planning
not planning board
Excuse
questions.
me, we pay the taxes.
We
pay the
understand,
taxes.
but these are issues that we can't
We're not going to be able to
can't
answer.
fix this for you or
I just
answer them.
want to know if there's a list, or going to be a list, or who's going to go
No.
moving.
No, this is just an exercise of allowing for development. It doesn't say anything about who will be
So we
there.
get to that-
It
that-
doesn't
that we
even
approve it.
say that there will be any development. It's just permitted by right.
So we don't know.
So can I just say generally about
Dante.
Yeah.
In this.
You know, rather dystopia. Say that word. There's a
I think we've all been here for 2 hours, and we really should try to keep the comments germane to what we have authority over, which is the overlay district and the character of the kind of development that would be permitted
So
there.
just with respect to what we have done as a board in this process, I've mentioned earlier that this is a compliance exercise. We determined in this process that we have the ability to come up with a model that would comply with the law, and we can do it pretty easily. whether the town wants to adopt it or not is up to the town. So, but we've identified a couple of areas where we can create these districts. It doesn't mean that there necessarily will be build out on them, but we can do this exercise that complies with the statute, and then that's as much as we can do. And then it's up to town meeting.
You can't dictate who's hungry. They usually then set off. That's it out. But the population is going to.
I'm not even addressing those
We're not
issues.
even arguing that.
I'm just saying we determined that for us to comply with the statute, we had to come up with overlay districts. Could we do it? Yes, we have some area in town that would comply, and this is the model that we're presenting. It's not the end of the story, as we've clearly heard tonight. There's going to be more debate about this, but all we can do is put the plan forward, and then the town votes.
Mr. Timon.
Hi, Ben Timon, member of the Select Board, 236 Larch Row. I had to miss a solid hour in the middle. I apologize. I had a conflict, but I have heard some of the discussion. I just wanted to say, as it seems like we're probably wrapping up, that I want to commend the planning board for the work that you've done, because you've been much more proactive, I think, than many other planning boards, and Margaret Hoffman as well for all the work she has done. Because I think that certainly my feeling is that we need to be in a position to comply with this state law. It is a state law. It's being challenged at the Supreme Judicial Court, as I'm sure has come up, and that's going to be argued in the fall. And the Supreme Judicial Court may, make some interesting rulings to try to reconcile this tension between home rule and zoning and the MBTA communities law. But if they uphold the law, we're in a position to be in compliance. And I think the planning board's to be commended for the work that you've done to get us into interim compliance and to be in a position to be in full compliance if we need to be. And I know this may be a controversial sentiment in the room tonight, but I think that the proposal that you put forward is about as modest a change in zoning as any towns around here are going to see. Boulder Lane is a historically difficult site to develop. The town owns a portion of it, which gives the town some control over what might actually be built there, as opposed to how it's zoned.
Great point.
And I think with respect to the other lot, I certainly don't think that, a mixed-use development back there, like a doubling of the Hamilton Plaza with 75 units of housing, is not going to spell the end of Wenham. That's my feeling. I think that you guys are on the right track, and I just wanted to commend you as one member of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Deirdre Peretti, and I'm a member of the Select Board also. And a couple of things. I do think that the upside that you're asking about is in part a matter of opinion. We have heard, I agree with what the Planning Board has said already, but in addition, through the master plan process that we've been mentioning multiple times tonight, we heard from a lot of Wenham residents that they would like more diversified housing stock, and they would like more affordable housing stock, not necessarily statutorily affordable housing stock, but housing that people can afford at different stages of life, so that our young people, our 20-somethings, don't have to leave the town that they grew up in because they cannot afford million-dollar homes, so that our senior citizens can age in place because they also can't afford to maintain million-dollar homes. Those are some of the things that we heard. Now, those people are also residents in Wenham, and that's why I echo what has been said tonight by the Planning Board, that it is important to follow this process because we are a democracy, and all 5,300 some odd people in Wenham have the right to have a say in this. And I appreciate the 35 or 40 people who made the effort and took the time to come down here tonight, because your comments are important. But we also cannot forget the other 5,200 and some odd people, that they also have a voice. And we have heard from people that housing diversification is important and it matters. The other things we heard in the master plan process, universally, no one argued that we should become Peabody or a town like that. Universally, everyone said, please don't lose the character of the town that is most important to us. Okay, I heard that from 0 people. throughout the entire process. But they did say repeatedly, the taxes are high, too high. We can't afford to stay here necessarily. We need different types of housing so that we have potential to be able to stay here. Okay, you may not believe me that people have other opinions than what's represented here tonight, but we have heard other opinions, different opinions, throughout the 2-year process. So I would just encourage everyone to try to keep an open mind. There are, I think, upsides. Okay.
Thank you. If there's no one else who wants to speak, I think I will ask for a motion to adjourn this special meeting of the Planning Board.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting tonight at 8:13 p.m.
And we will assemble on the 13th, is it, of June at 7 p.m. in Town Hall. Can I have a second for the motion?
Be quite second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye. Thank you very much for your time and for your attention.
Thank you.